my name is Alessia, and I'm going to hold this webinar on OKR, Scrum, and Agile project management for you. So just a quick overview on the agenda while you still write in the chat where you're joining from. So we're going to start with a couple of OKR basics. So the goal here is to just see where you're pick everybody up from where they are in terms of OKR knowledge. Just recap a couple of basics, and then we're going to go into the more definition of OKRs and Scrum and how does that work together. And then we get to see a hands-on example on how to get from OKRs to your Scrum backlog. And then, of course, there is a lot of time for questions as well. So feel free. So now you have written into the chat. In Zoom, there's another functionality that's the Q&A functionality, or for the ones of you that are joining via in the German environment, it's called FNA, so Fragen und Antworten. So basically what you can do there is to put all the questions that you have in the Q&A section. Please don't use the chat for that, because it will be hard to find the questions afterwards, because sometimes people comment things that are not questions. So if you want your questions to be answered, please use the Q&A or FNA section for the Q&A session later. All right, we have almost 100 people now joining. Nice to have all of you join us. A couple of words to myself. So my name is Alessia. I am in the team of training and enablement at WorkPath. I have been with WorkPath for several years now, training and coaching our customers every day. So really happy to share a couple of our insights here that we've been gaining over the years. Just a couple of quick looks on who our customers are and who we are as an organization. So we at WorkPath, we are actually striving to enable teams to work more outcome-oriented, and so customer-focused, and also create more measurability and therefore empower them to be more self-organized and to actually take decisions on data and metrics, and not just on let's say gut feelings. So a couple of questions to you up front. Please use the chat functionality for that, or the questionnaires that are coming up in a second. So the first question in our questionnaire is, do you or does your company already work with OKRs? You could see you should see a pop-up now with where you can basically click on an answer. So yes, no, and since sometimes it's neither here nor there, so there's kind of as well as an answer. Very good. So most of you have actually clicked on kind of. We have a couple of people that say yes, and some that are not working with OKRs currently. So there is kind of a mix between that. All right, perfect. First question done. Second one, how would you rate your OKR knowledge? And one is, I have read the Wikipedia article, or I don't know anything about this. And 10 is, I feel like I invented OKRs. So let's see where you stand right now, so we can basically tailor the webinar a bit more to your needs. I see a lot of people in the middle, so 5, 6, 7. Is pretty popular. We have one person who feels like they invented OKR. Very nice. Good to have experts with us as well. A couple of people that are just starting probably with OKRs. And yeah, so basically a good portion of you have already worked a bit with OKRs and know some of it. Very good. Perfect. Thanks for replying there. So let's jump into the OKR basics. So what we want to do here is we just recap a couple of things that then later will help us a bit better to understand how OKRs and Scrum actually relate, and also Agile on the other Agile methodologies. So we see there's a lot of different definitions of OKRs out there, but to us, it's about the main words that you should remember here is that it's about outcome-focused work and around measurability. So we want people to think, why are they doing something before they're doing it? And actually measure if they have achieved that goal. So this is something that we are very adamant and also in our way of teaching OKRs. So basically we have the two questions that we want to ask is where do we want to go? So what do we want to achieve? What value do we want to create? So an outcome is always a customer value, internal or external. And we need to also know, how do we measure if we actually got there? So this is why we take a lot of pride in creating measurability around the key results. Just a couple of things that we always want to kind of like reflect on first. So before we actually start with OKRs, and if you have not started with OKRs, these are the questions you should ask yourself. Why are you doing OKRs? Because also the OKR introduction should be outcome focused. So we should think about, why are we doing this? What exactly do we want to achieve with it? And here you can see the OKR principles. I always say that that's the magic sauce of OKRs. So this is what we can achieve with OKRs. There's a variety of things, and some things might be more relevant for you right now and some things less. So in the end, what you would like to have is some sort of alignment around the goals. So basically no double work, making sure that you are aligned vertically and horizontally to some degree, and making sure that also the output that you actually produce, so whatever you do in your Scrum or like Kanban backlogs and methodologies, that also is not overlapping with what everybody else does. It's about communication transparency. You only can be expected to execute a strategy that you actually know and that is transparent to you. It's about, like in every other Agile framework, it's about continuous learning. So doing continuous evaluations of if you have achieved the outcomes that you wanted to achieve. So this is why we need the metrics. And also learning about the process. So this is also something that a software tool like WorkPath actually helps you do as well with the data analytics suite that we actually provide. Then customer focus and continuous value creation. This is all about outcomes, right? We enact that in the way that we always write the customer and the value that we create for them actually into the objective. So for that, we also have a couple of different webinars that you can also find on our website. It's about engagement and team empowerment. Here, especially for product teams, it can be important to not be a feature factory, but actually have outcomes given to them. And then they can think about, how can I solve this problem? So basically giving problems and not features is kind of like the place where we want to be at. So the step that we want to develop in. So away from the feature factory and into the, let's dissect a problem, let's find the problem, let's test the solution, and actually then roll out the solution that we have tested and validated beforehand. Metric and data-driven decision-making, we want to know if we have achieved the outcomes. This is why we need metric key results, or at least key results that validate our assumptions. So all of this can lead to more purpose-driven work, of course, because if I actually know how the feature that I'm developing is kind of like paying into higher goals, and those paying into more higher goals, then I will actually have a way better understanding on how I'm impacting my work. And this is something that's usually lacking as well for Scrum teams, because they are already working Agile in their environment, in their realm, but they're kind of lacking the link to the overall strategy, that oftentimes it's not outcome oriented and it's just tasks they have to do, or it's so fluffy that they don't even know, how am I supposed to know if I'm even paying into this? So this can be important for Scrum teams as well. And it's about focus. How many times have we kind of like drifted off in our daily work and not thinking about the strategy and strategic goals that we actually set? So this is why we do regular OKR check-ins, and why it's also important to kind of like connect these two worlds of strategy, strategic formulation, and also execution. So if you're wondering, why should you do OKRs, pick one of these principles. And this is also what you should design your OKR framework after. Just a bit more going deeper into the three elements that we're going to have a look at. So objectives are actually the question, who is my internal customer? What value, like who's internal or external? I often hear let's say the objection, I don't work with the end customer. That is not valid, because you actually have some sort of customer internal. There's some unit probably that is taking your increment of value creation and develops that further. This is your customer. Whether it's you're providing analytics data to a certain internal group and they access that, those probably are your customers. Or if you provide a financial service to your own customers that are the end customer, you always have some sort of a consumer of the value that you're actually trying to create. And these are the people that we actually mention by name in the objective, as well as the value that we create for them. And sometimes it can also help to think of a desirable future state that you want to have for the customer. The key result, on the other hand, kind of like should be deduced from the values that we promise here. So we probably have different values. Maybe a process is supposed to be faster and better and more effective. And then these are the 3 promises that we should address with our key results. So actually making sure that we're not making empty promises in the objective. This is also why it's important to have objectives and key results always as a conjoined concept. So not having objectives and switching and changing key results, because that links to an objective that is a hint for an objective that is not very precise and not very realistic. We all know these objectives that say, oh, we want to be more innovative, more sustainable, more like faster and better in our processes, but it's not validated at all in the key results. So this is why it's important to distinguish this as well. This is basically the outcome that we want to promise. However, we also need to think about another dimension. So the output, the initiatives, the work that lies behind everything that can impact the key results. So this is the output level where we live and work in 90% of the time in the cycle. And it's very important to distinguish that, because this is the output that we are kind of like trying to complete in order to impact the key result. So this is why the key result should never be the output, because then we cannot change whatever the solution should be. So making a clear distinction between the outcome, the objective and the key results, and the output is very important. Let's have a look at why this is increasingly important, and why this is also in a very important aspect in terms of strategy execution. Once we have formulated the OKRs and go into the execution, it's important to distinguish these 2 concepts a bit more. So here we have an objective that says the usability of the sign-up functionality is smoother, faster, so that more people sign up. Output-oriented key results would look like this. So we did a redesign of the core features from the UX perspective. That doesn't really show if it was effective or not. Were we successful with that? It doesn't tell us that. So this is why we need to test our assumptions here, that what we did was actually of good quality and that it actually impacted the values that we want to create. So here the promise we have is smoother, right? So we want to make this a bit better and smoother. So 9 out of 10 participants in user testing perceive it as smoother than before. So you should perceive the difference between the output and the outcome. And here is a tip for me in drafting. The magic question to get from output to outcome, so what we do and why we do it, is, as I just said, the question why. So basically understanding and validating that we have been doing a good job. This is what is important here. It's the same thing for the other aspects. So automizing the sign-up flow, that is something we do, that's the output. And the outcome is decreasing the new sign-up time from 10 to 2 minutes. So this is the actual metric we need in the key result. And as you can probably tell, this level is for most teams actually something they already document. So a lot of teams say OKRs is double work with Scrum, but that is the reason for that is that the quality of the OKRs is rather on the red side and not on the blue side here. So this is why we need to increase the quality of OKRs in order for the integration with Scrum to actually make sense. Because what we see here is that everything that's on the red level here, that is important. That's important to know and important to do, but it does not have to do anything with the OKR. These are the initiatives. That's the output level. So basically what we have here, the redesign of the core features, that should be the initiatives. That should be what we deduce from the OKR and say, how can we reach a more acceptance of the smoothness of our process? We need to redesign. And putting the initiatives on the output level can have a couple of benefits. One, the Scrum teams don't perceive this as double work because this is already in their backlogs probably. And 2, we actually are flexible in what we do here really, right? Because if we say we need to fix these 15 bugs in the sign-up flow, and then the bounce rate will actually decrease, what do we do if it doesn't? What do we do if there was an entirely different problem here? We will not have 100% OKR achievement. So, and the last aspect, of course, is we know having the output in the key results actually just leads to us knowing what we have done, but not how well we have done it, and if we actually reached the goal that we actually wanted to achieve. So much for the differentiation between output and outcome, and why it is so important. Now let's have more of a look at OKRs and Scrum, which is highly related to the aspect that I just mentioned before. So just a quick review of the OKR cycle. You probably know this have seen this visualization in one way or the other. I will quickly run over the steps in the cycle. So there should be some sort of announcement of organizational priorities that comes from the top. After that, the teams and the departments would start their OKR drafting. Once they have drafted, they would align the OKRs, actually go into a room with the people that we need something to achieve our OKRs from. We need something from to achieve our OKRs, or that kind of lie on our value stream that we would impact if we would achieve or not achieve the OKR. So contributions and alignment are kind of like the two sides of alignment here. Then we would probably, from the feedback on the alignment workshop, refine the OKRs and then kick it off. And this is where it gets interesting, because here we need in the execution, and we need kind of like the intertwining of the two processes, OKRs and Scrum. We would do probably a retrospective right after the start of the cycle to kind of like, especially if we're new at this, we probably want to know what can we refine here again in the beginning, but of course in the end we'd also do a review and a retro. So let's zoom a bit more into the execution and weekly check-ins that we do. So just zooming into the levels that we kind of like usually operate in. So basically we have a company strategy, we have some strategic KPIs that we want to impact, and then we have whatever we do on the Scrum or like a Kanban level, any other Agile project management. And usually what there is usually a gap between those two. So we kind of know what we want to achieve. We know so what we want to achieve down the line, and we know what we are doing, but sometimes we cannot evaluate the value of whatever we have done and if that's actually paying into a strategic goal. So this is why we need the OKR to kind of bridge the strategy execution gap. And this is what we want to have a closer look into as well. So how do these two aspects really connect in the daily work of the OKRs? So we would end in the phase after the drafting and alignment phase, we would end up with OKRs that we would then kind of like think of what are the epics, the initiative, the to-dos, the user stories, however you want to call it, however you phrase the work that you do every day. This is what you should deduce from the OKRs. Sometimes you already think about these things in the drafting. So basically, probably you know already from the drafting what these are. If you don't, you should sit down later with the team and kind of like do almost like a backlog planning and refinement, and put down all the things you would need to do in order to impact the key result. So you deduce epics, initiatives, user stories, however you want to call them, and portion them in a way to put them into your backlog. Then you would probably do your sprints or work in your projects, maybe even like work in your different project phases. And by the end, at some point, you would want to check if what you have done here, so the output, actually had an impact on the outcome. And these are always hypotheses. We will never know for sure if what we have done is actually impacting the OKR in the way that we want it. So we have to check in. We have to see, did kind of like the rework of that feature actually have the impact that we wanted it to have. But here we have to test hypotheses. And this is where OKR and Scrum, and also like in general Agile product development, have a similar mindset. So we work with hypotheses and then try to validate or invalidate them. And in this case, we do that within the check-ins. These check-ins, of course, also have to be integrated into your meeting routine. So that's a general thing that you should do. Everything that you do with OKRs should be integrated with what the team already does. We don't want to have like only additional meetings for them. We want to integrate as best as possible. Which meetings those are, I will show you an example in a bit, but it's also something that you should reflect on what is best for you and how can you adapt this in the best way. Just kind of like giving a bit of a translation, OKR, Scrum OKRs to you. So this is an example as well. So it might be that your sprints are longer, or that there's a different way that you see this. But one example of how the OKR cycle links to, or like relates to sprints, is that one OKR cycle of maybe 3 months will have 6 2-week sprints within themselves. I have a visualization of that in a second. An initiative, so basically the output level that we have seen before, is an activity that we have deduced from the OKR that could influence the key result. That's kind of like the goal in the end. And on the other hand, we have an hypothesis that is to be validated in the sprint itself, and that is the sprint goal, epic, or user story. So basically, these are more or less the same. And then in terms of meeting integration, a suggestion that we do is that we should check in with the OKRs and see if the outcome has impacted the output has impacted the outcome. That's something we should do quite regularly. And the question is how frequent? That depends on how your team meetings are set. So if you have a bi-weekly team meeting, then you should do it in those meetings. Checking in OKRs every day is probably not a good idea because usually OKRs don't move that fast. So the needle won't move that fast. And you have to kind of like make sure that the team doesn't get discouraged if they keep looking at their OKRs every day and they don't change. So make sure it's kind of intertwined with your own meeting culture. An example for that could be the check-in could be integrated into the Scrum review and retros. This could be also an advantage where you kind of like have one section that is review and retro in the Scrum realm, and then you add like 15 minutes of an OKR check-in to see did the kind of like increments of value creation that you have created actually impact the exact value, so the key result that you actually wanted to impact. So kind of like linking back at that. Let's have a look at what this could look like in a cycle. So this is a bit of a complex visualization, but let me just walk you through this. This is basically the cycle that we have seen before, kind of just laid out on one time frame. So here we have the announcing the high-level priorities, drafting OKRs, aligning the OKRs, and then at some point we have the kickoff where the work starts. And this is where the Scrum level, so to say, kicks in. This is where we will have to like translate whatever we have done in the OKRs into our in our sprint planning, then into a backlog and plan it into our first sprint. After we have done the sprints, of course, we would have to review the results of the sprints and then also check into OKRs. And this is being repeated every time until we basically reach the moment where the cycle is about to end. So here we have an integration of the sprint review and the execution and check-ins, so to say. So basically we do the check-ins and execute the strategy through the sprint, and then we check in again. So basically we would need to understand not only did we finish something in the sprint, but also what's the impact that we've had on the OKRs. And here, of course, we need to consider that the cycles always intertwine with each other somehow. So by the last sprint, so to say, we probably already need to think about what are the new OKRs that we should set based on the high level priorities. So this is how it all intertwines. Yeah, and then let's move into an example of how exactly to get from the OKRs to the backlog. So we have an example here that can make this a bit more, illustrate this a bit more. So if I'm in the e-commerce teams, for instance, and I see that we have a problem with the checkout. So basically people are clicking on the checkout, but they're just not finishing it. There could be several different reasons why that's the case. So it could be that we have, as you see here, like one of the deduced initiatives from the bounce rate from the checkout. So basically people jumping off from the checkout. Could be several reasons. Could be that the checkout button just has the wrong color. It could be that people don't want to put in credit cards details anymore, and they want to have PayPal there as a payment method. So it could be that there's many different things that are not working right now in that checkout, and the reasons for that could be different. And if we would actually assume that we already know the reason and put actually the initiatives in the checkout, what would we do if that's not solving the problem? So what would we do if the metric that we monitor is just not moving despite all the work that we put in? So again, put rather the metric itself in the key result. In this example, we have seen that there are problems with our checkout, and this is why we have set the OKR. our checkout process is faster and smoother than before, so less people jump off. So we have, it's faster with the time check, the time reduced by 20%. We have a satisfaction rating here that shows that it's maybe more smoother. And then we have so that less people jump off, so the future state. And this is what we actually want to influence, so reduce the bounce rate from the checkout by 10%. As I said, there could be many different problems why that is happening. And by putting the metric in the key result, you have freedom to actually explore the problem and find the right solution. So I put the two options down here. So one could be we have to add PayPal or Alipay or another payment method as the payment method that that people need, because probably they're just bothered if they can't pay in the way that they would like to. But then again, there could also be like, we have like the button is too hidden or has the wrong color. We actually find the checkout and actually people are jumping off because of that. So here you can actually choose to deduce a couple of them and maybe even others that relate to another key result. Then once we have kind of like aggregated the key results, we would prioritize them somehow. How you prioritize, if you already do that in a certain method, please continue doing that. What you could factor into your prioritization is the impact on the OKRs. So however you would get a list out of that you could basically already put into the backlog, and how you prioritize that backlog is then another question. And this is where we kind of like want to put the impact on the OKRs on as a prioritization method a bit to the forefront. And here we can actually say like, how many resources do I have to invest? And what is the impact, the expected impact on the OKRs? And here we have maybe discussed with the team already. So the engineers say, well, implementing PayPal is definitely harder than the UI colors. Of course, that's something that we think though has a big impact. And it's less impact, less effort than the last initiative. So let's basically focus on the ones that are small and have quite a high impact. So this is what we then would choose. And then of course we have to understand what size is that? Like, is that a sprint goal size? Is it an epic? Is it a simple user story? How exactly is that, is the size of this item? And here, of course, we need the team to estimate that. After actually estimating this and kind of like maybe sorting this after and maybe slicing it a bit more, so to see like, do we have to do this in like several sprints maybe? Or can that be done in one sprint? So this is how we would plan the backlog and pour everything we have decided here into the backlog itself. So basically going from understanding what are we actually doing, so why are we doing this, to what are we doing, in kind of like timing that, and then in the end, of course, trying to go back and think about what is the impact that we have had here. So basically taking everything that is the result of that and seeing if that has impacted the OKRs. So, of course, there is an advantage if you also connect the systems that you use. What you can do in WorkPath, for instance, is to connect your Jira instance with the goals in WorkPath. So basically, wherever you would look, you would see what the impact is. And on one hand, this is important to kind of like for maybe the product owners to understand how many Jira issues are actually linked to the goals. And on the other hand, for the engineers as well, and knowing how exactly are we impacting higher level goals, and if are we actually having an impact at all. So this could be an important aspect too. All right, so those were the slides, and now you get to ask questions. Please use the Q&A section for that. There is the chat functionality as well, but here we probably won't be able to answer all the questions that kind of like are drowned out by the noise. And we have the first question in the Q&A is who determines how long an OKR cycle is? Is it always 3 months? And if so, why? So we at WorkPath have a quite flexible, so to say, mindset when it comes to the implementation of OKRs in general. So it's not important that it corresponds to what we think is right. It should be like functional for you. So we have customers that have 3-month cycles, we have tertial cycles, but also we have half-year cycles. Why is that the case? There's a different customer reality usually. So however, so the cycle should be determined by your own reality, by the heartbeat of your organization, how we call it. So there is an internal and an external factor to that. Sometimes the external factors are the ones that are more determining. So maybe there's seasonal work, maybe there's different limitations that I have due to logistics, maybe. So maybe I work on a product that just takes longer to develop. So basically what we would have to understand is how fast is the company producing value, so to say, and how should we set OKRs there? The important thing is that we kind of assess, make an assumption, make an informed decision about this, and then maybe also revisit and reiterate. We've had customers that changed their cycles just because of the feedback that was coming bottom up. So this is another factor of like engagement and team empowerment, one of the principles we saw before. The teams should actually say, this is going too fast, or this is not fast enough. So you should gather the input from the bottom up and actually understand, is the assumptions that we have made, are they actually valid? So again, also testing your assumptions regarding your own OKR process. And yeah, in the end, you will see there are some companies that just want to have quarterly cycles because they want to speed things up way more. Then that's kind of like painful in the beginning, probably, but it will make sense over time. So yeah, the quarterly cycle is not compulsory. It depends on how fast you are actually able to move the needle on the key results. We don't want to discourage people as well. Like if I don't know, there are different like different units that just make decisions way slower because we have to like get all the stakeholders on board. That could also be a reason, internal reasons, for instance, why you would not have a longer cycle, because it just takes longer. So yeah, make sure that you choose an option that is good for your good for your organization. All right, can you explain the prioritization element again? How did the SML on the y-axis make an impact? So the important thing here is to just make sure that you are doing a rough estimate of the resource invest. If you actually understand that this is a lot to do and it will take even longer than a cycle, then you should probably either split it into like different elements. So if this, for instance, if initiative 5 would actually be a very, very big chunk of work that you can maybe this is something that the product owner can estimate, but it has a very big impact, but it's too big to even do in one cycle. Then you probably should just slice the initiative a bit smaller and understand what is the value that we can create there as well in a smaller amount of time. So actually like doing a rough estimate of size and impact in comparison. Of course, then maybe as a product owner, I don't know exactly how much time that takes or how big that is, and if we should slice that into like smaller pieces. And that's something where we would actually need the engineers to go in as well and answer that question for us. How does WorkPath support the alignment process of OKRs, for instance, in the workshop that we talked about? So there's a couple of different things that you can do in WorkPath. One, and that's to me one of the biggest one, is screen for alignment potential. There's 3 phases in alignment. One is understand who you need to talk to. 2 is actually talking to each other and agreeing on things. And 3 is the actual confirmation and kind of like documentation of the alignment commitments. In the first phase, so screening for alignment, we help because we are just a system where everything is visible. You can screen and Google for, you can search for everybody else who is providing value for the same customer. This is why the language is so important and the uniform way of drafting OKRs. So you can basically screen for people that are paying into the same customer value, so to say. You could as well with our goal graph, for instance, you can understand better who else is contributing to the same high level goals, and also understand maybe also in the discussions of the alignment, discuss what would happen if we don't create this value, who's in our value network that would then suffer as well from that. So it helps you prioritize also regarding the overall value creation and not just your own team's benefits. And as well, something that helps as well in the first phase is to that you can send out contribution requests to understand who does need help from me and who do I need to talk to in order to achieve this. It kind of like pushes you to think about that before you even start the cycle, because that's what even yesterday a customer mentioned to me, that they actually could have known this before, that they were blocked by another team's contribution that was not prioritized by that team, but they just didn't think of it. So actually, after the drafting, thinking about who do I need to achieve this is one of the most crucial things. And actually, requesting help can give the teams that get the request a bit of an overview of what degree of their capacity would be needed in collaborative aspects. All right, next question. We have an objective that can be reached in 1 quarter. Do we need to break it down to smaller objectives or repeat the same objective in multiple quarters? I would actually break it down a bit to what exact value can we achieve in the first quarter. And here, sometimes we shy away from that because we think maybe that's not value that we create. But so when we talk about the customer that we are serving and the value we're creating for them, if we are more in an explorative phase where we don't actually roll a feature out or something, but we just design a concept, then we can still have a validation of that. Or even if we just understand the problem better. I've seen very good outcome-oriented OKRs that just say, our team now is confident to be able to solve that problem because we understand it better. This is exactly as good as an OKR as anything that we would roll out later. So having an understanding of that there is also like a degree in, let's say, metric quality that we have if we are explorative and if we just explore concept, that is one of the important things that you have to consider when you break down an OKR into smaller phases. So understanding what increment of value creation can we create in this cycle is something that to me is more informative as well for the rest of the organization that wants to align with you probably. And sometimes you can even mark them and say like, this is OKR 1 out of 2 or OKR 1 out of 5 that we do in order to signal that there is more to come on this topic, but we're just right now focusing on the exact value that we create, because then we can also apply concrete metric. All right, next question. Can we understand an initiative as a backlog item? Yes, so the initiative is usually a word that is used for any backlog item, or if you're not in Scrum, any maybe project milestone even. So anything that is executing. So anything that you do in order to impact the OKR. So yes, it is a backlog. It can be a backlog item. We just don't want to like, backlog items are kind of like categorized in terms of size usually in the first categorization instance. And then maybe in terms of urgency, but it can definitely be understood as a backlog item. Does OKR has a differentiation of epics, user stories, and sprint goals, or is it always written as Jira issues? So you can link any kind of Jira issue to the in the Jira integration. So in the link, you actually will see, so in WorkPath, you can actually see what kind of degree that is. So you can see if it's a user story or an epic. So it will always be named Jira issue in general, and you can like link all the Jira issues. But in the visualization of it in the tool, you will actually see that this is the epic XYZ. Right, our initiatives often impact multiple key results against an objective. Do you implement a one-to-one relationship between key results or initiatives? Right now, our initiatives are having been to be mapped to the objective. Okay, that's interesting. So I would always see that an initiative can impact several key results. So maybe going back here, looking at that. So I can imagine that the epic of adding PayPal as a payment method could also contribute to the satisfaction, honestly. So I can see that an initiative can actually impact many different key results. However, I would always have it mapped onto the key result, because then I actually can see if the metric is going up. If you want to do an initiative and can't find any metric that matches that. So maybe there's the option is that the initiative is important, but we wouldn't have a way to validate if the initiative was successful because there's no key result. So we probably should add a key result that kind of like measures the impact of that initiative and the success of that. So ask yourself, how can we see if we're successful with that initiative? And then add another key result. That's what I would do. Or it shows to me that the promises we're making in the objective are not mapped out with each key result. So to me, this is rather a OKR quality issue. That's the kind of like the impact that I will try to have. So revisit the OKR if there's an initiative that we actually want to do and we can't find anything to measure if we have been successful with that, we probably should add a key result. And yeah, if we can already map that to the objective, then probably in the objective, we already find that kind of like impact statement, but or the promise that we're making in the objective. So yeah, that's how I would actually go about that. All right, next question from Jesse. Any suggestion for setting up organizations where some teams work in Scrum Agile and others use more traditional planning and management approaches? How can Scrum Agile teams align with non-Agile teams using OKRs? So this is the magic of OKRs. It's not important in which kind of like framework you work in, as long as you kind of like adhere to a common cycle. So if you have one cycle where you all kind of plan your outcomes and then only align on the outcomes, it does not matter what kind of method you use here after that, because you are not putting the output in the OKR, but the outcome. So basically the effect that you want to have, the thing you want to achieve, then you align on these outcomes that are independent on the way you achieve your output. So waterfall or agile. So by the end of the alignment workshop, I should know what the other team wants to achieve. And the only thing where I would actually need to align with them in terms of execution is in which rhythm are you working and when do you need my contribution? So this is the only place where I would actually need some sort of commitment maybe. So let's imagine a Scrum team works together with a waterfall team and they need something from that waterfall team. Then the Scrum team should tell them, we probably need your contribution by the end of our third sprint. Then you should tell them when that is and give them just the deadline. So sometimes we kind of need to think a bit be user-centric and customer-centric in the communication with the other teams as well, right? Think about like, how can I explain this to them when I need when from them? And how can I make sure that I actually get it? And sometimes the key here is communication and actually, trying to think about like, if I tell them I need this by the end of the third sprint, will they know what that means? Or will they actually just need a deadline, just the old-fashioned calendar date that by then we actually would need your contribution. So to me, this is oftentimes more a communication issue than really an OKR issue. All right. How to deal with an overload of meetings while combining OKRs with Scrum that negatively impacts OKR implementation and engagement. You are very right. That is exactly the case. Most people, when they see this slide here, they're scared that this is going to overload everybody. The best thing that you can do here is go by a very pragmatic approach. So what I do is usually something like this, a meeting inventory. So making a meeting inventory and seeing what are we doing already. If you work in a scaled framework, for instance, you probably do something that looks very similar like OKR, but it's different because you talk about output and not outcome. So this is where we have to understand, are we actually like doing double with the same things, just in different meetings? Can we intertwine them? And also one of the most important things, how much do we have to be in each meeting? Who needs to be in which meeting and who's actually providing value and who are we just like putting into meetings? And also, how do we design the meetings? I mean, there is a big misconception that in a drafting workshop, it has to take 8 hours and we have to all be there. No. Look at an example of an agenda. Think about what are the exact outcomes of every single step that I make in that meeting. And is there an easier way and better way to achieve this? The best example for the alignment workshop, for instance, is I need to know who to align with. There is the option that in a smaller team, everybody reads out their OKRs and tells me what they're doing. There might be a better way to achieve that, maybe in an Excel sheet that just everybody screens for all alignment potential. So think about the outcome in the design of the workshop more than the output. See, there's another way to apply outcome orientation here in the way you design your OKR concept or framework. And in the end, like if anybody feedbacks you, it did not provide any value for me to be there, then don't plan them in. Just have them on call for the next meeting if somebody needs to give input, for instance. That can be the case especially in drafting workshops. If you actually have drafting workshops that need some expertise from people, but they're just needed to answer like 2 questions, then just have them on call and like call them in with your teams whenever you need them. It's a matter of sparing resources. Think about who do you need for which meeting, and also communicate that to the teams. Who is needed for all these meetings, and how can we make this better? And to me, the most important thing is bottom-up feedback. If the process doesn't work for people, then they should actually be able to communicate that. However, there's a big misconceptions that OKRs are not extra work. They are a bit of extra work, but to me, it makes sense to do that extra work, to oil the machine, and after then run, and to not have so much outcome waste. So basically things that I didn't think about before I executed them. So I didn't think why, or how do I measure if I actually am successful with this? And thinking about like what success means in terms of the success of the output. This to me is always worth it to actually invest a bit more time. So even in the visualizations that you see here, of course, like doing the check-in with the review and retro will require extra 15 minutes, but understanding if I actually made an impact with what I've done here, to me, would be worth it. And you have to design the entire meeting structure in a way that is good for the customers, and your customers in this sense are the employees. So they should be kind of like involved in shaping this. All right. In your last example, your objective was very unspecific, faster, smoother. Should that be the case to be specific in the key results? Let's have a look at the OKR in question. So in the end, sometimes we will have the situation that we know exactly what needs to be done. So if we have validated that the PayPal method is the exact thing that people need, if we have done that in an exploration phase before that, of course we can be way more specific, and we can say what exactly do they need to jump off less. If we know that this is the only thing that they need, and if you have like talked to 7 customers or 700 customers and actually know that this is the thing that you actually want to have. So basically you can be more specific, but in the end, oftentimes we don't know the solution yet. So oftentimes we know the problem. We know that people jump off, and probably there is a feedback that is, it needs to be smoother and faster, but people don't really know how exactly that's supposed to look like. And the team itself needs to do the exploration and the execution within one cycle. This is the case where an OKR is more vague. And to me, actually, the faster aspect is something that is actually pretty specific, right? So knowing how much time do they actually take right now for the checkout, and how much could they take? So maybe we have looked at industry standards and see that, checkouts as an industry standard, or like our 5 competitors, it just takes like 2 minutes to check out. Why is it that long for us? And maybe that's something that people are bothered by. So let's just test that and check it, and check if this is kind of like raising the satisfaction. But you're right. I mean, we need to be very specific about the value that we want to create. And so satisfaction is oftentimes like translated with smoother, but of course we can dissect what exactly does smoother mean, and how can we measure if that's actually the case. All right, Katharina, do we have also the possibility to connect MS Teams and Planner into WorkPath OKRs, or just Jira tickets? There's also the option to connect Teams in basically the exact same way. So our mindset behind this is to have OKRs where you actually need them. And this is also an option. I think in MS Teams, you can already integrate it now in your teams itself. I think the planner is coming up, the integration with that. So I'm not entirely sure about that, but we just sent out our product newsletter. So probably you'll find some more information in that as well. But yes, and you can also, for those of you who work with Asana, this is also something that's coming up, and Azure DevOps is even something that already exists. So it's an integration that we already have. All right, at the end of the quarter, we have an OKR that is incomplete, but still valid for the next quarter. Do we create a new OKR or just extend the original to the next quarter, specifically if the key results need to be adjusted? So what I always would do is never just copy paste an OKR without checking it first. So understanding what value have we created. And if we were very specific in the value and the key results, we probably need to change it anyway. So cutting it, slicing it a bit differently, and then drag it into the next quarter. That's what I would always do. Katrin asked a question. What is your advice if I want to change teams working with SMART goals, traditional MBOs, to trying OKRs? So to me, SMART goals and MBO are basically something that makes sense and that can be integrated with OKRs. So to me, SMART goals are and MBO processes are oftentimes, let's say they're oftentimes not based on teams, but individual performance. And that can be a benefit to just have some more team spirit and actually trying to achieve something as a team and not having conflicting goals that kind of like work against each other. That could be one argument. And to me, OKRs are just like the next evolution step of MBOs and SMART goals, because it borrows a lot of different aspects from those two principles, but just lifts them more onto a high level. Usually MBO processes are not customer centric, so it's not about the customer value that you create, but rather on like performance goals or like revenue goals or something like that. Those goals are important. We still look at them, but we just bridge the strategy execution gap in a different way. So if you look at our slide here, probably performance management, MBOs is something that's very important. We need to intertwine that with the OKRs, that's for sure. But usually revenue goals that we have or like other goals that are in MBOs are not really like leading indicators that tell us if that person has actually done a good job, but rather tells us oftentimes what they have done. So OKRs are more outcome driven in that way and measure the actual impact we had on the customer. And that to me is always a good argument to use OKRs. So Mark had a question as well. How about annual goals at team level in the context of OKRs? Should these be dispensed with? I'm not sure what you mean by dispense, but in general, it's always a bit of a question what's the difference between an annual and a quarterly cycle, or like a sub-annual cycle. Basically, the difference is that we would learn more if we do quarterly goals. We can have like overarching long-term strategic artifacts that are yearly that we have a look at every time we draft OKRs to make sure that we're edging one step closer to these goals. That's for sure something we can do as well on the team level, but probably in order to guide the teams and to tell them what are we supposed to do in the next quarter on this level, you probably need more than just a yearly OKR. Because OKRs are supposed to do several things. One is provide teams with information on how to prioritize their work. The second is tell them if they have actually achieved value. And 3 is actually help them prioritize during the cycle, so to say. Because we all know what happens. We of course make very beautiful plans, and then they're going to be there left and right are things coming in, and then we need something to prioritize. How do we spend our time here? And what's important now? And just having a yearly OKR sometimes makes it too fluffy for them to actually be provided with guidance and actual guardrails on how to move and what to do. All right, Jenny has a question. What to do if the OKR process got stuck internally and the team is not motivated anymore? So usually there is a reason for that, and they are our customers. Or if we are responsible for the OKR introduction, these people are our customers. So finding out what is not working, involving them in the creation of the solution can also work. And also in the end, maybe showing that there is a couple of changes going on as well. So we have a customer that we've had for years, and they have not progressed in the way they wanted to. What they did instead as a reaction is they rolled out large-scale enablements to make it valid that we're now investing more in the process. And they also like introduced like a bottom-up feedback mechanism where they actually felt heard, because that's kind of like the problem, right? If we do a process that doesn't make sense, we need to remove those blockers and make that and take it seriously, right? There is a reason why they're frustrated. And they need to feel heard, and they need to know that things are actually changing and authentically have a commitment, maybe even by leadership. So the reason why OKR process gets stuck is usually because there's not enough enablement, or there's not enough, let's say, support from the top. So these are usually the two things that we could address here. All right, Vera, do the organizational objectives usually change every 3 months, or are they kept only the initiatives are adapted? So we all know that at the organizational level, so the C level usually does not have enough time for anything. So usually sometimes it is the case that the top level OKRs are changed every year only, or every half a year. However, there's always some sort of mid-cycle or like mid-year check-in where we kind of like look at, are we actually moving in the right direction to support these OKRs? So what happens usually is that some sort of like strategic impulse or priority is given during and the beginning of the cycle. So the teams kind of like can redirect their efforts a bit. You mentioned that you could share an example of how to integrate this way of working in the existing meeting structure. Could you elaborate? Yes, of course. So it was actually this illustration here. So actually knowing what are we doing already? This is probably what the Scrum teams are doing already. So sprint meetings, then stand-ups and reviews and retros. Mapping that out in any way and understanding the outcome of that meeting. This is something that you should actually do, and understanding what are we doing in each meeting and why are we doing this? Again, outcomes. And then understanding which of these meetings is best suited to intertwine with the why of the check-ins, which is, let's make sure the OKRs are moving. Let's make sure that what we're doing on the output level impacts the outcome. So thinking in this outcome-oriented way in designing the process can also help. So why is WorkPath the best tool to pilot the OKR process? Yes, you will also get the slides. So in my opinion, of course, there's a different tools out there. What I actually am proud of at WorkPath is that we actually care about the quality of the OKRs as well, and that we have an enablement team that is increasingly integrated into the development of the tool. So we are out there every day, seeing how our customers are working with the process, and our knowledge and let's say our technical knowledge about the OKR process is like ingrained in the tool in a lot of ways. And this sometimes I have a feeling that some other tools are more striving to like facilitate the documentation, but to us, like having the value of yes, solving the problems and actually being more outcome oriented as a goal, that at least is the thing that motivates me to believe that WorkPath is the best solution. All right, we have reached our limit of 12 o'clock. So unfortunately, I won't be able to answer the rest of your questions, but feel free to come back to the next webinar. And if there's something pretty urgent, you can also reach out to me directly. It was lovely to have all of you, and thanks a lot for all of your questions. And yeah, see you next time.